In a world where power isn't just about being seen, but about what happens behind closed doors, the Mizrahi Mafia ruled Israel's shadows. They didn't flaunt their wealth. They built it quietly through intimidation, bribes, and connections. While the world focused on the famous Mafia families, the Mizrahi Mafia quietly took control of Israel's most powerful industries, shaping the country in ways most people couldn't even see. From humble beginnings to becoming one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country, the Mizrahi Mafia controlled not just the underworld, but also the corridors of power. And trust me, it's a story you won't forget. So how did a group of immigrants, discarded by society, rise to the top? And what does it take to control everything in a country like Israel? Well, let me take you on a journey you might not expect. This is the story of the Mizrahi Mafia, Israel's most feared and elusive criminal empire. Now, to understand how the Mizrahi Mafia came to be, we need to rewind a bit. Picture Israel back in the 1950s, newly formed, filled with hope, but also seething with tension. Many Jews were fleeing persecution, seeking refuge from war-torn countries in the Middle East, North Africa, and beyond. But the reality they found was a harsh one. Israel was struggling to define itself, and so were many of the Mizrahi Jews, immigrants from places like Morocco, Yemen, and Iraq. And many found themselves casted to Israel's poorest, most neglected neighborhoods. Imagine starting over in a new country. For these immigrants, survival was a daily battle. And for them, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about being heard. It's in these very streets, where displacement and struggle bred a sense of resilience, that the foundations of the Mizrahi Mafia were built. As the 1970s rolled in, the Mizrahi Mafia was no longer just about surviving. They were now thriving. They weren't content with just scraps. They wanted power and wealth. And how did they get it? By taking control of the very things Israel needed: money and business. These weren't your average criminals trying to scrape by. They were brilliant tacticians. They looked around and saw opportunity in places others didn't. Construction became their battleground. The major real estate developments across Israel, a perfect way to launder money, control politicians, and manipulate the market. The Mizrahi Mafia realized that owning land wasn't just about selling it. It was about shaping the landscape of Israel itself. But it wasn't just about buildings. The Mizrahi Mafia took over Israel's drug trade. Heroin, cocaine, whatever was hot on the black market, the Mizrahi Mafia controlled it. They smuggled drugs into the country, used Israel as a hub, and expanded their network all over the Middle East, Europe, and even further. Their operations were so sophisticated that they were able to run illegal businesses under the radar of both the public and the authorities. Real estate projects doubled as fronts for laundering money, while nightclubs and restaurants allowed them to move profits across borders without anyone noticing. But what made them truly dangerous wasn't just their wealth. It was their ability to blend seamlessly into the fabric of Israeli society. They weren't living in the shadows. They owned the shadows. Behind every empire, there are the faces, those who rise to power and shape the future of the operation. For the Mizrahi Mafia, one name stands out above the rest: Yaakov Alperon. Yaakov Alperon wasn't just another mob boss. No, he was the kingpin, the mastermind who knew how to play the game better than anyone else. He built his empire through violence, yes, but also through strategy. He understood that control wasn't just about force, it was about influence. And Alperon had an uncanny ability to get to the people who mattered most. From politicians to businessmen, no one was out of his reach. Alperon wasn't some power-hungry thug, he was a visionary. But in a world of power struggles, vision comes with a price. His ruthless approach to business and leadership made him a target. He wasn't just feared by his enemies, he was also disrespected by those within his own ranks who had begun to challenge his dominance. Still, Alperon's charisma and sharp mind kept him in control until his shocking assassination in 2008. Alperon's death marked a dramatic shift. The power vacuum that followed sent shockwaves through the underworld, leading to a brutal war for dominance among rival factions. But Alperon wasn't the only force in the game. The Kadosh family, also critical to the Mafia's rise, found their roots in the construction industry. They weren't just builders, they were kingmakers. They built not just homes and skyscrapers, but a legacy of corruption and manipulation that ran through Israel's political system. Together, the Alperons and Kadoshes represented the ruthless backbone of the Mizrahi Mafia. But the game wasn't over. It was never over. When Yaakov Alperon was murdered in 2008, the streets erupted into chaos. The power vacuum was real, and rival factions were quick to jump in. The Kadosh family and others fought for control of the business that Alperon had so fiercely guarded. The war wasn't just on the streets, it was also fought in the boardrooms, where deals were made, alliances forged, and betrayals unfolded. What made this struggle unique wasn't just the bloodshed, it was the sophistication of the battle. The fight for control wasn't just about sheer force, it was about leveraging influence, pulling strings, and navigating the murky waters of Israel's political landscape. Who could control the local government contracts? Who could manipulate the markets? These weren't just questions of who could fight better, they were questions of who had the right connections. The Kadosh family, who had long been entrenched in the real estate world, saw an opportunity to expand their influence in the wake of Alperon's death. But the Kadoshes had their own internal struggles, their own betrayals within the family created fractures that rivaled those of Alperon's empire. As the Mizrahi Mafia grew in power, their ties to politics and business became inseparable. Corruption was a side effect, but it was also a necessity. You don't rise to the top without knowing who you need to talk to, and more importantly, who you need to silence. Their influence extended far beyond criminal activities. They controlled construction and real estate projects. They had politicians in their back pockets, law enforcement officers who turned a blind eye, and a whole network of businesses that acted as both fronts and money-making machines. The reality? The Mizrahi Mafia didn't just rule through fear, they ruled through connections. They owned key industries, had ties to corrupt officials, and controlled the black market. Their operations were vast, interconnected, and seemingly untouchable. Even today, the legacy of the Mizrahi Mafia continues to cast a long shadow over Israel's criminal world. Though the faces of their leaders may have changed, their influence is still felt. The construction industry is still a breeding ground for money laundering. Politicians and business elites are still wrapped in a web of backroom deals, while rival factions fight for dominance in the underworld. They may not be the public face of Israel's criminal world anymore, but their reach is still very much alive. And in the world of crime, influence is everything. So, next time you walk the streets of Tel Aviv or see a towering skyscraper, just remember, the most feared mafia in Israel might still be closer than you think. Thank you for watching Crime by Chapter. If this case left you wanting more, like and subscribe so you never miss a moment.